Hello, welcome back to the OWL reviews. This is for day 2 of week 1 of season 5. I think I should have a better handle on this time. 'Cause before it was my first time trying to do anything like that. So I should be better. I added like some timestamps and like locations better, so it should be better overall. Anyway, the first game of the match here was London San Francisco. Shock had played yesterday, so they're 1-0 on the season. It ended up in 3-1 San Francisco. I don't think anyone really did think this is like an upset. A lot of people saw this coming, including myself. So first map is Lijiang. Shock 2-0s this. Um, the rosters are Sparker, Backbone, Hattie, Admiral Landon, and proper Sam, Kalush, and Violet. So exactly what we expect from Shock on that market. So it was 100 to 45 for Shock. London rolls out with Soldier, May, Ryan, Lucio, Bap. You'll notice they play Rush a lot. They enjoy Rush. And Shock played with exactly what we saw yesterday, being the Soldier, Genji, Winston, Ana, Lucio. London rush and they fall early, so they force back, but they make it to point, and they force a flip at 24% for the Shock. Then London window comes out, Shock dive past it, and they reflip for 27% for London. So these fights, you'll notice, are very scrappy, they're very long. Obviously, I can't see everything because the broadcast doesn't see everything. So even if I was just writing down exactly what the broadcast sees, there would still be gaps. Sparker Visor gets proper, Backbone blizzards out, Backbone goes down, they trade beats and grenades. It gets the backline for Shock to help win the fight, and they're 73% on the board at this point for Shock. Backbone falls to proper on the back high ground. He actually walled himself up to get to him. It was very funny. Uh, yeah, he gets proper up there. London goes to the point. Kalug gets the backbone. Sandblade gets supports. Hottie and Admiral flip the point with Shock at 99% in overtime. London cut off the point to regroup, allowing Shock to flip it. Proper Visor cleans up and Shock take round 1. Moving on to Gardens, we see more of the same with the rush versus the dive. London push up to the Shock bridge, while Proper flanks through to the White Room. Backbone walls him off, and then Shock, after that wall cooldown's gone, they just dive on and kill the backline, and they get the first cap. Next, London goes all the way to White Room. Proper sits back on the bridge. London walk the point and brawl it out. Backbone looks to hold off the flanks, kind of often acting like an off tank, kind of. But Proper nanovisors through a Landon window, and a Backbone wall blizzard, and he just goes through it. Proper gets a lot, and Shock have 60% of the point now. Spark of Visor gets Violet. There's no beat available. Beats available, but Violet doesn't beat. Sandblade gets not a lot. Violet now comes back with the beat, and Shock hold on. It looked like London was winning that for sure, but they stalled it out, didn't let London flip, and they win the second round of map 1. So it was revealed after the Proper had 14 out of 29 final blows for this map, which is not a flooded deadlift, but it's close as you can get without having one pretty much. Moving on to Eichenwald, where Shock win this 2-1. There are no swaps, and there are no comp differences. Again, London sticking with this rush, which is what they're known for, but even in Overwatch 2, I guess. London rolls out on Rush again. Proper goes to look for a Widow pick, but he swaps over to Soldier. Backbone walls the choke. Hottie fire strikes Sam somehow, and Shock regroup. And it was 3:10 on the clock. This is Shock's offense. I forgot to mention. My bad. Shock go to the tower corner. Backbone falls to Proper on a flank up the right, and Proper continues up that hallway. Shock dive and clean up, and they cap first out with 5 minutes heading into the second. Proper sneaks up to the top of the castle after that fight, and London, I don't know if they knew he was there, but London go up to the cart before the gate opens, so Proper being on that castle high ground does nothing, so he has to drop and he falls. Then a colleague gets nothing. Shock is back now with 4 minutes on the clock. Sparker visor window gets a nil. Nil's a funny word, I think it's good. And colleague, who's obviously Kaluge, Primal, disrupts Hattie out of the point. He ends up dying, and cart gates open with 3:30 on the clock in the second. Kaluge gets walled and goes down. London take the top of the castle. Shock back, and London drops to the cart. Sam falls to a Howdy fire strike, and now there's 2:30 on the clock at this point. Sam throughout this map in particular was dying to a lot of fire strikes. I don't know, he's just catching them left and right. Uh, Shock take the lower castle. They try to rotate through like the low underground, but they get walled, and they get blizzarded, and they get shattered. And the team trade beats, but the Violet beats not enough for Shock, and they have to reset. And now they have a minute 45 on the clock. Proper loses to Nano Visor to Sparker Visor. I don't know how that happened. And that Shock have to reset again. Quick fight though, and they have 120 on the clock. So Kalush jumps card. He primals. He goes down, and he trades for Landon. Hottie holds onto the card. Finn gets Admiral as they wait for Kalush. Landon windows up on the castle. Shock dive the window, and then Shock cap out heading into third with a minute 50. So London don't hold the first corner aggressively. They actually hold back the second corner, but Hadi shatters Kalush, and he actually blocks off the Violet beat with his shield, so Kalush doesn't get the beat, and he ends up dying. Backbone blizzards it. Admiral beats a visor and a blade at the same time. I don't know why the ults are being stacked. I notice there's a lot of DPS ults being stacked in this game. I'm not sure if that's because of poor coordination or you need to exert that much pressure to get kills. And that was 45 seconds on the clock. So Sparker pushes out with his visor, and he just goes down on that bridge on second. Colleague dives point. He primals, but he goes down, and Shock reset with 20 seconds on the clock now. So quick fights again. Shock likes taking a lot of quick fights. Kalush swaps over to Ryan and touches the point, and he gets Nano. And so London decides to just kite back to the second corner, because at this point the card is, of course, rolled back. They end up coming back after the Nano. Sparker goes up to the high ground in the back and dishes a lot of damage, and Shock is stopped with 46.55 meters, which is like, I think it's like not quite around the second corner. Now London's on the offense. Again, no compositional changes. London ran out on rush. Shock stage on the bridge, and Kalush is forced back by Hattie. London just get resources in the small room before going to the point. Finn hits a flank nade and gets a lot. They jump on, and Kalush jumps on the back line, but he almost goes down. He ends up jumping out in time, and then as soon as the resources are back, Finn gets another huge nade, and this time they capitalize on it, and London loses the fight, where there's that 250 on the clock. So London flanks. So Proper was far off on the left, like in second point, and so London decides to dive onto him, like to rush onto him. Except Hottie doesn't do that, and he goes around the other side. He goes around the castle, or the tower in the middle, and he gets like dove on, but he just lives because he's a Reinhardt, and there's no Proper to do damage. And then London meet back up and collapse on Shock and get 420 going into the second point. Proper is now on the highest ground, and he almost falls to a fire strike. Lots of fire strikes going back and forth here from Hattie. Not really back, just forth. And Shock staged on the close high ground. Not the castle, but the one next to it. Contesting on the first corner. Blackbone blizzards the cart, and he just makes space, doesn't really catch anything. Colleague primal forces Hottie into the castle. I remember this. London goes back into the castle, but then they just decide to take the castle high ground, and Proper gets Backbone off it, which happens a lot actually. Backbone ends up falling on the May surprisingly often, and they wipe London with 2:55 on the clock. So Hottie goes in, forces beat with Shatter. Proper Visor gets nothing. Admiral beats it. Sam Nanoblade gets a 4K, and Proper KS is the last one. And now there's a minute 57 on the clock. So this London taking much slower fights than Shock did on their offense, but that's just the nature of their comp. They can't go as fast. So Hottie catches the point. Landon window makes space, but doesn't get anything. Finn sleeps Backbone. Proper kills the sleep, and then Proper goes into Admiral. Hottie fire strikes on Finn, ends up killing him. Deluge Primal finds Landon, and then Admiral later, and London reset with 40 seconds left on the clock. So London rotate into the castle. Finn gets a massive anti. London stabilize and then rotate to the high ground, and they blizzard on top of the castle. But Finn gets an anti on Landon, and he dies, and then Shock just clean up from there with the buff healing. So they win out with the card, making it just under the bridge. Then we're moving on to Watchpoint Gibraltar, and we have Poco coming in for Hottie, and Kilo coming in for Sam. So we'll get something different from London here instead of the rest with Poco in. So we get London on London's defense. They're running Widow, Genji, Zarya, Lucio, Ana, compared to Shock running what we know they run, except Widow instead of Soldier. London stage on the high ground, and Kilo flanks around coast, like back on like the normal high grounds, not the front ones. Kilo flanks around the coast and gets backbone. Uh, and then he starts pushing the payload on Widowmaker, and they're under the car wash at 313. So London hold up in server, and Shock dies them, and they back up the scares. But then when Poco gets energy, they just walk into them and they kill them, and now it's at 236. So London are like playing this server side. They walk up to the high ground by server, but they don't really go much further. Yep, proper flanks under the tarp. It doesn't get anything. Nano backbone and he gets Finn. London takes out Violet and Shock reset at 152. Kilo diff Sparker and he pops sights, and then London are just forced to sit in server because they can't really push out with the sights, and Shock just pushed the cart. That almost gets the end, but Poco runs to contest it. Proper then goes into the backline because there's no Zarya protecting. It's just free, and Shock heading to second with 335. So London now set up in the shuttle, not on top of it, but in it. Nano Kaluge copped down. I don't know what that means. Violet gets backbone. Finn falls to land a nade, and Poco grabs one, but Shock was just pushing the card this whole time that's going on. So they're basically at the end at 346. The Nano backbone gets nanoed on the Finn, but Violet Peel saves him with boop. It was very good boop. Violet Lucio actually showed up. It was pretty decent. Colleague Primal gets Admiral and Landon. Shock clean the house and go to third with 325. Kalush starts up on the far bridge, like they're very aggressive with the space they're taking, and he's back at like London's bridge at this point. Backbone Blade gets Violet, and they back up. Shock kite back, and there's 243 on the clock. Finn is frontlining, just like on the first corner. He's looking for nades. He nanos Kalush, who goes deep, but not fully into the backline, just between the backline and the front line. Admiral B trades with Violet Beat and proper blades. When the beat dies, Poco falls and London can't touch, so Shock cap with 207. I will be back. Okay, I'm back. Had to put food in the oven, so now London's on their offense. Poco pushes the cart under on a Zarya pick again, and London supports also stay back on the low ground. They actually don't try to take the high ground at all, because I guess if they go up, they'll just get dove and die. Backbone's still on the cart on the Genji. He's like rotating between the two, getting some poke. Kilo's back on the mini low ground on his Widow pick. So London pushes the cart, and they take server at 3 minutes. Like, there's been no deaths. Nothing really is happening at this point. London's just taking the server room. They all rotate into there. Sparker gets Violet, and London is still just holding in the server room. Nothing's moving cart. Backbone goes up too far, and Kaluge gets him. Sparker is looking for picks way back on his Widow on like the front bridge, and it looks like this whole composition is just sitting in the server room until Sparker gets picks and they can move out. So I don't know. At 210, Poco is on the tarp. Nano backbone helps get Finn. Proper blade gets the backline, and Lennon cleared out at 136 now. So there's really only been one major fight, almost like 2.5 minutes into this game, into this round. Backbone Blade loses 1v1 to Kilo. He went in very deep onto the forklift, and Backbone just grappled away, hit the headshot, and Kalush helped clean. Proper gets Sparker, and Shock just dived the backline. Now there's 37 seconds left on the clock. My stream dies, and it was like watching a Game Boy movie with a broken cartridge, and it comes back, and London somehow caps out. Sparker is on Soldier now, Backbone's on Widows, and Poco's on Diva. I could not tell you what happened, and they head in the second with 215. Backbone is back on Genji. Proper Blade and plus Nade gets the London backline, and now it's at 115. Kilo's on the top of the shuttle. Backbone gets Nano, but he gets naded and he dies. Proper gets backline at 47 seconds, and London are forced to reset again. London walk out top. Sparker Advisor gets nothing. Kalush Nano Primal gets Landon. Proper gets Sparker in overtime. London get it, but they come back with beat. Sparker's now on Widow. Violet beats. Landon sniped out by Kilo. Proper Blade cleans up, and London pushes just before the end of second, and Shock win the series quite easily. So overview for this one. Shock looked just as strong as it did yesterday, even with London's not like standard play that we saw from Paris. And their whole team is the stars. I said I'm still not sold on Violet Lucio, but I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's like at worst he's mid. So it's okay. London comps were odd, and they looked really bad other than Eichenwald, where they actually had some fight, but they still didn't make it to the third point, so not great. Poco Zarya on Jib was curious, but it had some merit because it made the backline very hard to dive, but it also didn't do anything because there's no mobility, so there's no cart pressure. And it ended up relying on Sparker getting picks, and if you're going to rely on Sparker getting picks, I feel like there's other ways to capitalize it better than a slow-moving composition. So the Tommathan player of the match, it was Finn's consistently large nades prevented London from sustaining, which is what you would think their comp's good at with the Baptiste. But because Finn just nades it, the dives are very easy, and they just can't live. So I give it to Finn. He's the GOAT. We'll move on to Boston Uprising and Vancouver Titans, who we have both neither seen. Boston won this 3-2 in a very close series, which is exactly what I predicted. I predicted both of those games correctly, which is cool, I guess. So Ilios, 2-0 Boston at the gate. So Boston running Valentine, Striker, Punk as their tank option. They have 3 tanks available. They opt for Punk most of the series. Crimson Faith. Vancouver's running Psycho, Aspire, False, Masa, Sky Reaper. Yeah, so Shockwave on the bench, and Psycho actually is never subbed out, so Aspire and Shockwave are the 2 that are switching. I believe Sky Reaper comes out for, I forget their other guy right now, but he just comes out. So we go in the Lighthouse, and Boston and Vancouver both opt for this Diva pick, which we haven't seen very much. Boston's running Echo, Soldier, Ana, Mercy, pocketing this Echo, and Vancouver's running Genji, Soldier, Diva, Lucio, Ana. So starting at the gate, Valentine takes out Psycho, and Boston take the point early. False is slept and antied, but he gets out. Masa and Punk dive, takes out Valentine, who's on the ground, and Striker takes out Masa, so Boston flipped the point, and there's 17%. Oh, Boston flipped point. 17% for Boston. I don't know how that happened. Well, someone had point. Punk holds on to the point. Yeah, so Boston has it. Vancouver dive takes out the Punk mech. Nano Valentine with the Mercy pocket gets Aspire, and Masa. Sky takes Valentine out, but Boston wipes and cap with 50% for Vancouver. Okay, so Vancouver's at 50% now. Sure. Aspire almost falls. Valentine dupes to Ana. Masa falls to dive. Aspire Advisor and gets a lot of them. Punk stalls point. He gets demeched, and Boston supports make it back. Fate is swapped over to Brig at this point. Striker comes through but falls to Aspire, and Vancouver flip with 85% on the board for Boston. So they're at 50 right now. Boston's at 85. Aspire's on high ground. Striker Visor comes out. Seiko Blade trades Striker, and Boston flip with 99 for Vancouver. Psycho makes a swap to Echo. Valentine is slept and died. False gets demeched on point. Psycho gets Striker. Faith rallies. And Boston takes round 1. 100-99 victory. It's very close. All these fights were it was very close every fight. Most of the time. No one really there was no fights where someone got dominated. It was very back and forth. So now we're moving on to Ruins, which was 155 for Boston. I do not want to add that. Aspire goes coast on the... Oh, I should talk about comps first, my bad. So Boston's on Genji, Reaper, Zarya, Ana, Lucio, and Vancouver's playing a Mei, Widow, Ryan, Lucio, Bap. So Aspire goes coast, and on the Widow probably sees, so then Punk decides to swap to Doomfist, giving Vancouver first point control. Psycho takes its striker with a sniper across the map. Boston reset with 32%, and Vancouver striker with Boston reset with 32% on the board for Vancouver. Striker swaps to 776. Aspire picks Crimzo. Valentine gets 2 in a 2v5 situation. I forget who this other person was, but they turned back in 2v5 and Boston ended up flipping with 55% for Vancouver. Vol swaps over to Zarya at this point off of his Doomfist. Aspire pops side on the coast, but he doesn't get anything done with it. Valentine goes down. Punk gets nanoed. Striker picks Psycho. Sky Window comes out. Punk Meteor strikes. Valentine Blade gets Lamp plus Massa and Aspire. Boston team wipe with 64% on the board. Punk dives the hallway, but gets slept, and Boston clean up from that sleep into the dive. He still got the slam off. Massa stages for a touch, but it's not enough. He can't live long enough, and Nano Valentine just cleans up. So the ruins was definitely more decisive for Boston. Very back and forth on Lighthouse. Moving on to Midtown, which was 3-2 for Vancouver. They subbed in MCD for Crimzone and Shockwave for Aspire. So round 1 on the Boston offense, we have Boston coming out with the Genji, Soldier, Doom on a Lucio, and Vancouver holding a Mei, Soldier, Ryan, Lucio, BAP, which is the rush variant on this Midtown defense. So Boston failed a dive. They just die on it, and now it's 305, right? So Valentine poke fire truck. He's like sitting on the fire truck and he's poking. Vancouver kite back for reinforcements because someone died. They come out on the backside of point. Shockwave gets Valentine. Vancouver take back control with no percentage on the point, and now it's 210. So Sky Reaper is sitting between point with window. Nano Blade, Valentine, they dive the window. It gets Shockwave, I'm assuming. Shockwave, and the rest of Boston's clean up point with 31. And so Boston go into second with 350. Vancouver hold this close choke with the round comp still. Punk gets walled. Shockwave Visor goes in and gets nothing. Punk ults. He's on Doom. He lands and dies. Boston reset with 256 on the clock. Next fight, they trade beats. Sky Window comes out and the gate closes. So before there was an easy way to go from first to second through the gate, that big gate closes, similar to a Dorado or a Watch Punch Gibraltar. Boston cuts back. False shatters the back line, and Vancouver continue to hold on these two close chokes. For some reason, Vancouver backed on the high ground. I highlighted that because I don't remember. I didn't know why. Maybe someone died or something. And then Punk moves to the point. Boston moved to the left side to get to the high ground, not through the room, but through the steps, the makeshift steps. Valentine Blade and Striker Visor cleans up, and there's a minute 7 moving on the point. Punk engages into the third point with an ult to try and stuff them. Shockwave Visors to high ground to frag McDonald's. Shockwave does crazy damage. Punk cancels beat. Striker kills the backline. Punk and Striker pull through the cap second despite their supports going down to Shockwave. So now they have a minute 30 going to third. Boston forced Shockwave back off the high ground. Off the high ground. Vancouver hold the close corner. They ended their push through to the back line. Psycho gets Faith. Boston soft reset, and they stay in the lobby area. They don't give all that space, but they don't push forward. False pins into the back line. He gets slept. Faith beats. Shockwave's in their spawn, and False dies, and now overtime is triggered. Valentine Nano flex the Sky Reaper's sleep, and he kills him. The Blade gets nothing though. Shockwave gets Striker. Faith frags Psycho. False is holding on to the point. But then he's nanoed and slept. Massa beats, and he Reddit Lucio's MCD and Valentine, and Punk falls. Boston stops short with 83.96, which is it's just around the last corner to the point. You don't actually turn it yet, though, I believe. Moving on to Vancouver's offense, which is noticeably smaller than this one. So, with Boston's defense of Tracer, Soldier, Sigma, Zen, Bap, versus Vancouver's Genji, Soldier, Winston, Lucio, Ana, which we've seen to be what we know is meta, or what most teams are playing that we've seen so far. Um, Boston spread around the point under defense. They're not really contained to any one area. Vancouver go under the subway. Soldier Shockwave takes that close high ground by the house, the subway high ground house, I guess. Punk's on the subway landing on Sigma, and MCD is back at the between points almost. Vancouver dive MCD. Punk ends up dying with him. Massa gets Valentine, and Vancouver cap the point quite easily with 5:13 entering second point. Boston holds around the first corner at a police car. Valentine is just being annoying on Tracer. Nano False goes on the Punk. Emo comes out and Punk lives. Valentine whiffs his pulse. Vancouver dive gets the backline and Massa frags out Valentine again. He's been going crazy this map. Vancouver move cart under the passageway with 3:53 on the clock. Vancouver dives early, and False just goes too fast, and he ends up dying, and Vancouver falls back with 3:28 on the clock now. False primals, he dies to window visor, and Striker gets Psycho, and Vancouver is forced back with 3:04. So Shockwave gets on the high ground and visors, Punk whiffs his flex, Psycho Blade gets Punk, Massa beats Punk on Diva now, and MCD falls to Psycho. Vancouver entered third point with 3:21. So now Punk swaps off of Diva to Zarya, and he's holding back on the second corner. He can't get to the first one. Vancouver push up to that corner. Shockwave Visor gets Lamp against the fifth window. False Nano Primal gets MCD. Shockwave gets Striker. That's 2 minutes. And then Vancouver cap out. I wrote this 2 minutes, but then Vancouver immediately capped off that. So they take map 2 off that. So Boston definitely have a worse defense here. The Vancouver defense was pretty good. But yeah, Boston struggled a bit more. Going on to Circuit Royale, which was 2-1 for Boston. The subs with Victoria for Striker, Aspire for Shockwave, and Aztec for Sky Reaper. Aztec. Yeah, I forgot about him. So far we've noticed Aspire and Shockwave are being the ones subbed out and Psycho staying in the whole time. Just different than what most people might expect. Starting with the round 1 with Vancouver's offense, both teams are running this Genji, Widow, Sigma, Bap, or Zen, not Bap, Zen, and then the difference being Vancouver's offense having Bap and Boston's having Brig. So it's Brig versus Bap is the only difference in composition, and Boston's holding onto the first corner inside that house religiously, and there's a Genji 1v1 off to the side. MCD diffs Aspire from across the map. Aztec falls to Valentine, Seiko falls to Victoria, Valentine gets rocked and he dies, and MCD Trank saves Punk after he gets rocked. Lamp is used, Massa windows, Psycho Blade diffed by MCD, Massa refrags MCD, Valentine's Blade is forced back by Aztec Trank, and Vancouver push forward off that corner finally with 1:30. So now Boston's holding on to that back corner by the point at the very end of first. Psycho gets Punk, False frags out, and Vancouver move on to second with 2:50. After Punk goes away, False just says free reign. MCD gets diffed by Aztec, and Aspire's the one moving the cart now. Punk rocks Psycho, and then he flexes to find Massa. Valentine gets supports. There's 2 minutes on the clock. Boston not holding, they push out right outside their spawn room. Massa windows and False flex to get Boston out of their spawn, and the cart is moving around the hill corner at about 1 minute, around the bend, not even a corner, just a turn. And Spire sights up, and the cart is close to the end now. Valentine Blade forces a lamp. MCD tranks. Punk flex gets falls, and Boston hold off Vancouver, who was stopped just short of the checkpoint at 81.05. Moving on to Boston's offense. Uh, Same thing, with the difference being the brig and the BAP. Vancouver is not holding inside the close house like we saw Boston, and they're actually giving all that and just holding onto the bridge corner. So Boston just pushes that whole thing for free. Valentine almost falls on the bridge, and then Vancouver give that more space again to hold on the last corner. Victoria hit a nut shot on Aztec, and Psycho lost his Genji tool. False and Psycho die. Boston enters second with 450, so not a lot of a fight put up by Vancouver on first point at all. Boston hold around the high ground hallway. Like this is stairs that go under and up, so they hold around there. Punk Flux finds Masa. Aztec Trank does not save Psycho, unfortunately, and Boston keep pushing at 345 now, and then Valentine just gets a 4K on third point to cap out. So Boston offense very good here compared to Vancouver, who had a very good offense here. So both teams very even right now. Then we move on to map. What is this? 4? Map 4. Which Vancouver ends up winning with 68.28 to 65.97. Don't really know how else to record scores for this map type. It's a little weird, but pretty close. We get subs. We get Striker for Victoria, Crimson for MCD, Shockwave for Aspire, and Sky Reaper for Aztec. So all these subs up here basically reverted, plus Striker for, plus it, I don't know. I got reverted. Something happened up here that I missed. Oh, MCD I guess comes out for the first time. No, I don't know. Whatever. So the compositions we have is just Genji, Soldier, Ana, Lucio, but then Vancouver's opting for Winston while Boston's opting for Doom. So the teams meet on the outside of the point, not the inside hallway. Shockwave was on a flank, but then Boston forces him back, and they leave, but then he just comes back because he's legs. And Psycho gets Valentine and Punk, Crimzo, and more, so big 4K. And Vancouver start pushing with 7 minutes on the clock out of 8. Punk swaps over to Zarya off of his Doomfist. Striker swaps to Reaper. Psycho Nano gets Valentine. Vancouver almost pushed to the checkpoint, but Boston take control of the bot, so they don't get the close spawns. And then Nano Punk for 5:45 on the clock. Valentine gets Shockwave. Faith beats Psycho Blade. Shockwave visors plus beat does damage, and then Psycho cleans it up. Vancouver push back at this point with 445. Boston Nano Dive gets Vancouver. They already started pushing mid-fight at 4 minutes, so it's back in the middle, I guess. Shockwave is in the back line. Valentine Blade finds the supports. Shockwave gets Vac. Vancouver Ana, maybe? I don't know. No, that doesn't make sense. I don't know. Okay. Alright, so I just ate food. So, I don't know where I was, but we'll jump cut it. I'm going to start from, I don't know, maybe here. So Boston Dive, Nano Dive gets Vancouver. They already started I remember this, yep, okay. Shockway's in the back line. Val and Tyne's Blade finds the supports. Shockwave gets, I remember reading this too. I'm gonna leave this in. This is funny. Dies in. Shockwave gets a Valk and an Ana, and he dies. But he also visored. He thought it was winnable or something, but he just got rolled over. Response come back, and they push back the bot. It's 313, and it's about midway at the midway point right now. Oops, my bad. Sky falls to Punk. Psycho Blade gets countered by Faith Beat. Boston continue to push. Striker Nano gets nothing, but it zones out. Punk Grav gets false. Crimson goes down to false inside the Grav. And Boston gets the checkpoint. Boston then give away ball control. They push it to half. And Vancouver pushes it back to the halfway point, and it's at 154. Punk falls to Shockwave as the striker. False falls. Shockwave visors. He then dies to Valentine. The Vancouver get backlighting and frags, and Vancouver push to the checkpoint. Almost. But Boston movies cart. Crimson Nano on Valentine before death. Vancouver cleans up Boston. Vancouver gets a checkpoint, take the lead with 10 seconds left. False Nano Psycho Blade forces the Faith beat. Valentine Blade gets Shockwave and Massa. Boston win the fight, and then they move the bot back through to OT. Valentine swaps the Tracer, and they're fighting at the halfway point in the hallway. False dives in, then he gets out. Shockwave Visor gets Faith and Crimzo and Punk. Falls, and Vancouver win the map, and we're off to game 5. So finally, game 5, we have Oasis, which ends up being 2-1 for Boston in a spectacular fashion. So Marv 1 comes in for Punk, and Aspire comes in for Shockwave. Currently, Shockwave is 2-0 in his maps, and Aspire is 0-2. And Punk has played every map, but now Marvel's coming in. So we have those are the two differences. And on Gardens, which ends up in 100-99 for Vancouver. Boston roll it with Genji, Soldier, Doom, Ana, Lucio. So Marvel coming in as a Doom player maybe, versus Vancouver's Echo, Soldier, Winston, Lucio, Ana. Both teams stage around that main mega. Boston move, then rotate to the high ground, and they cap it. Vancouver stay around the main. Striker flanks into the hallway, but he's forced back. He tried to do a Spire. Striker gets collapsed on and dies. False gets Valentine. Massa and Marv down to Punk. Striker comes back and kills Psycho, and now there's 35% on the thing for Boston. Vancouver take main. Marv punches Aspire off the map. Striker falls to Psycho. Marv vaults out on Doom. Lands on the Mega Health Pack to get HP back. Faith falls to False. Nano Valentine takes out False, and Boston win the fight, and they have 80% of the point to 0 for Vancouver. So now Aspire swaps over to the Tracer off of the Soldier. Sky goes to Moira, and Overtime activates. Striker Visor gets Massa and Aspire. Aspire trades for Valentine. And Vancouver flips the point, so it's 99-0 at this point. Aspire picks up Striker, and then Boston is forced back when there's 30% on the point for Vancouver. Striker swaps over to the Tracer himself. Psycho copies Genji, he blades and gets nothing. Valentine falls to False, and now there's 63% for Vancouver. So next fight comes the Beats trade. Sky Coalescence gets stunned by Marvel, gets punched out of it. Valentine Blade goes down to Psycho. Boston is forced back, and there was 90% on the point for Vancouver at this point. Valentine swaps to Reaper. Striker falls to Psycho. Marv Meteor strikes. False Primal to Lives. Psycho's Striker Faith. Sure. Aspire pulses Marv, and Valentine's down to Aspire. In the end, Vancouver take round 1, 199, coming back from a 99-0 deficit. So this is round point for Vancouver at this point. But we go to City Center, and Boston wins this one 100-82. Boston coming out on the same comp as Vancouver, the only difference here being the Doom for Winston. Vancouver take the early high ground because they're monkey, so it's easier to get up well. Sure. But Boston just forces them off, and then Vancouver comes back to dive the back line. Crimzo gets slept, or gets sleep. Striker gets Massa, Seiko naded, so he falls down. Marv 1 dives and gets Sky Reaper, and Boston take the first cap. And of course, the first cap is usually the most important cap, or the one that gives you the most. Aspire swaps Tracer. Marv stages middle high ground. Around like the middle tower or whatever. Crimzo forces him down. Massa's cut by Valentine. Nano Psycho gets Crimzo. Striker outruns the Nano Psycho though. However, he eventually falls to Massa. Boston maintain control at 70%. Sky Reaper swaps over to Moira. Nanovisor Striker gets Sky and Aspire. False Primals at 90% to live. Striker swaps over to Tracer. Striker gets the backline, and Vancouver flips somewhere in there. Not sure exactly where. Psycho gets Striker Crimzo. Valentine gets Psycho. Marv is false. Massa beats to steal the point, and Boston flip back. Then Valentine falls in the backline. Psycho gets cut, and Boston still hold on to the point. And Sky Reaper Cole flips the point back over. And Vancouver have 25% now to Boston's something. Crimson Coalescence forces Vancouver back to the cars. Faith beats, Valentine dies, Marv gets Psycho, falls, Striker gets Sky, Massa is just being a rat on point and just living. And Boston end up flipping the point with 82% for Vancouver. False and Aspire go down. Dumol gets Sky Reaper. And Massa's still just a living rat. And Vancouver keeps touching, but Boston end up capping it out. So we're on University, the final map of the series, final point. And this one ends 100 to 99 for Boston, so very close the entire way. This time there's actually variance in their compositions. Boston rolls out on Genji, Soldier, Doom, Ana, Lucio, and Vancouver goes Meihanzo, Ren, Lucio, Bap out the spawn. And I said there's variation, but I actually lied, because lying is fun, and Vancouver hot swap Genji, Tracer, Winston, Lucio, Moira. As soon as they see that they're on Doom. They actually don't lose any positioning off this, because the point doesn't really go, and the Doomfist composition can't really hold those chokes as well. They have to initiate onto them. So they don't lose any positioning. False gets slept in a room, and Vancouver get the early cap. So Valentine falls in the under hallway. Like there's one side with the hallway with the minions, the other side it goes under. So it's that one. Psycho is down to wait. Don't know what that means. Could be anything. Marv takes falls. Boston get point with 32% for Vancouver on the board. Sky Reaper Cole engages. Striker Nano Visor, and he gets 4, so now there's 36% for Boston. Beats trade. Valentine falls to Psycho. Vancouver flips the point back over, but then Boston resets. And there is currently 64% of the point for Boston compared to Vancouver's 33 at this time. Crimson swaps over to Moira. Valentine swaps to Reaper. Scott falls to Marv. Aspire goes crazy. False primals to Liv. And another 75% on the point for Vancouver. Scott Cole engages on them. Marv meteor strikes. Massa beats. Marv ends up falling. Striker Pulse misses. Crimson Coles. Valentine trades Psycho with Blossom. And False falls to Striker. Boston end up flipping in overtime, and they get it at 69%. So now it's getting to overtime. It's not getting to overtime, but Boston has the point. It's getting to the end. It's Psycho Blades, Faith beats, and Sky falls to Valentine. But then Vancouver C9, and they don't touch the point. Because obviously, whenever they flipped it over, Boston was nowhere near 90. They're at 69, but they ended up C9ing. The fight wasn't won, but it was definitely winnable. Punk played well. He showed his flexibility, but Marv looked better on Doomfist in the end. False truly show that he's worthy of being the solo tank for this Vancouver roster. He looked solid in all his characters. As Winston, there was like one time where he went in too early and just died, but it'll get better, and I don't think you have to go get a main tank with False. I think you'll be okay. You probably won't be like one of the better teams. Both of these teams are probably like mid, right? But it's okay. It's not like atrocious. It was surprising that Psycho was in full time over Shockwave Aspire, and the Aspire lost all of his maps, and Shockwave won all of his. But consistently, Boston looks stronger more often than Vancouver. Obviously, this could have went either way the entire time. Circuit Royale, Boston looked way more dominant. And Midtown, Vancouver did look better, but Boston looked strong there as well. You know what I mean? It wasn't like horrible. But Boston did look like the better team. So the Tommathan player of the match, I'm actually gonna give it to Massa despite losing, because he seemed to consistently be outdoing Faith and was getting like huge picks seemingly out of nowhere and just living. So even though we lost, I'm still gonna give it to Massa because he was the player of the match to me. So whatever. And now on to the most anticipated match of the day, and a live event, the Battle of Texas, Dallas at Houston. This is actually in San Antonio, but that's closer to Houston. I looked up. So some people were expecting Dallas is the favorite here by a large margin, being like one of the better NA teams. The best NA team, you could argue, or I guess you could just objectively say, almost, you can't objectively say it, never mind, but consistently one of the best NA teams last season, and that comes back with basically the same roster. So we started on Oasis, which ends up just going 2-0 for Houston. Spoiler. Dallas coming out with Edison, Sparkle, Fearless, Fielder, Chio, and Houston with Merit, Pelican, Dante on tank, Iris, and Lastro. You would expect this to be Piggy, but Dante said no, I'm the GOAT, so he did that. So we move on to Gardens, which ends up being 100 to 99 for Houston. And Dallas comes out with the Soldier, Genji, Winston, Ana, Lucio versus Houston's Soldier, Echo, Doom, Ana, Lucio. So the opting for the Echo, pulling a Yaki playbook perhaps. Dante starts on the high ground, but he's forced back. Pelican is on Echo, he's high up on main. Pelican catches Fielder out, and Sparkle gets Iris. Lastro gets trades for Sparker, and Sparkle and Outlaws pull ahead and end up capping first. Sparkle hunts down Dante and ends up getting him. He gets Lastro, and the Dallas flip back whenever Houston have 23% of the point. Pelican coast flanks up from the coast side on this Echo pick and to the high ground, but doesn't get anything. However, he does force Dallas down. Dante falls to Fielder. Fielder then goes down as well, and Houston soft reset. But Houston recognize that Fielder's down, and he's the only one who died, so they go back and they spawn camp Fielder, because obviously Dante on Doomfist is very fast, so he gets back there. Now Houston goes back to the point, Lastro beats, Chio falls to Edison Visor, and Houston flips the point back at 62% for Dallas. Houston is the Houston backline's on the high ground. Dante dives Edison, Merit falls to Sparkle Blade, Pelican copy Lucio, but he doesn't get beat out. Edison catches Pelican and Lastro, and Dallas flip back at $66 sign for Houston. Dante ends up punching Sparkle. Fielder sleeps Pelican off of the map, which is very hype, because he tried to do the same flank, and obviously they took note, so they were like, oh, let's watch for this. Got slept. Fearless Primal gets Iris, or Iris, or whatever the hell they were calling him on stream. Iris. Merrick gets Fielder, and Fearless falls to Pelican. Houston flip it in overtime. So Nano Dante comes in, gets Edison, and Dallas reset, and that was 88% to Houston. Fearless swaps over to Doomfist himself. Medicine, that's funny. Edison is down to Dante in Yuka, and Houston win the map off a huge nade from Iris. So now we're on University, and this ends up going 100 to 74 for Houston. Dallas also opting for the Doomfist themselves. The difference here being the Echo versus Genji. Team fights high ground. Instead of going onto the point or into the hallway, they fight on top of the high ground. Houston end up taking it, and they dive into that hallway, and Sparkle gets cut out. Houston take the first cap. So Houston early dive on one of the chokes with their Doomfist comp, and they just team wipe Dallas off a great engage, and Houston has 33% of the point. Next, Edison ends up getting Pelican. Fearless is punched off the map. I don't know if he got punched off the map or if he punched himself off the map. I believe he got punched off, and Houston has 66% of the 60% of the point. And now Lastro loses a duel to Sparkle. Merit Nano Visor catches Sparkle himself, and then Sparkle and Fielder, and then that's 90% for Houston. Team straight beats. Merit is down to Fielder, Pelican gets Fielder, and Sparkle Blade gets Iris, Dante, and Dallas end up flipping the point in overtime. Pelican almost gets Chio, but he ends up living, because Pelican was alive in this after, because they flipped the point, but then Pelican was still living, and he ended up almost killing Chio before he got out. But then Pelican just does so much damage and exerts so much pressure that he basically forces all of Dallas off at the point, and he solo flips it back. But then Dallas comes back quicker. They flip the point again, and Fearless ends up dying. And then the stream jumped, and I went up like 30%, so I could not tell you what happened between like 30 and like 60. So Houston ended up taking map 1. My stream just died, so whatever. I'm sure it was hype. And now we're going to Midtown, which ends up going 3-2 for Houston. Hanbin comes in for Fearless, so we expect maybe some off-tank gameplay coming from Dallas, which is what we get. We get a Soldier Genji Zarya on a Lucio comp from Dallas versus a Soldier Echo Doom on a Lucio, same thing we saw on the other points. So Dallas, on their offense, they're actually the first team I've seen an OWL go into the subway car instead of going under it. They go into it, and Houston ended up playing on this landing. Pelican is just spamming in. He's spamming it from both sides, wherever he needs to be. Hanbin punches onto the low ground. Pelican gets antied, and he ends up flanking behind the subway car. Edison gets caught out by Fielder, and Dallas falls. And there's 2:30 on the clock now, so after a minute and a half, they just were pickle chilling in the subway. Nano Pelican gets antied. Nano Hanbin cleans up. The better Nano wins. Edison Visor comes out. Houston are looking to recontest. Because Dallas currently has point control. Merritt flanks through the subway on the Soldier. And Dallas DPS fall to him. Pelican copy comes out and gets nothing. Lastro beats, Dante ults, and Houston regain control of their objective with 87.9% for Dallas. Merritt is staging in the point house for a Visor, but Sparkle Blade gets supports, and Dallas went off of Sparkle, basically carrying, and go 245 in the second. Dante dive is punished by Edison, and then Houston hold the high ground. Edison Nanovisor gets slept by Fielder. Last row goes down, and Dallas went out 140 going through the underpass. Houston comes out and forces Dallas back. And then there's 110 on the clock. Sparkle Dive gets caught. Sparkle dies. Chio beat Hanbin, Grav, and Pelican copies Zargrav. Merit Nano Visors. He gets Hanbin. Nano Edison ends up winning the fight, and Edison Visor just stuff does not work. Last row beat. Dante gets Fielder, Merritt loses to Edison, and Dallas end up capping second going to the third with 130, and Hanbin is swapped off to Doom. Dante ults into the back line, antied on leave, and goes down. Hanbin clears Merritt, cleans up Merritt and Iris. Dallas move point, Nanovisor Merritt gets Sparkle Fielder, Dante slams Edison, and Dallas can't touch for overtime. Houston stopped Dallas before the second corner, and that's the end of round one. Okay, so now we have round two of Houston's offense. Dallas end up poking at the top of the subway, and they give Dante a juice punch. Sparkle gets Pelican, Merritt in the alley between the houses at through 10, so it's been basically a minute. Nothing's really happened. The first fight's been done. Hanbin is by the landing. Like going up to the subway from the defensive side. Dante stages back, like he goes through, like past them around to the second point. He punches Edison off, and the stream lags, so I had no clue what happens. Sometime later, Nano Pelican tries to stuff, but Merritt Visor gets 3. Edison Visor gets Lastro, Hanbin falls, and Houston cap first. Have 4 minutes and 8 seconds going into second. We hear the crowd chanting "Let's go Merritt" in the background, which is very hype. Definitely miss that. Dallas is on the high ground because they have a Zarya, so they can't really hold the first point. Hanbin threatens to grab, so he's creating space just with his ultimate. Lestro beats Sparkle Blade. Dante lands on Sparkle with his ult, and Sparkle dies. Houston continued to push through the underpass. Now there's 2:55 on the clock. Nano Sparkle doesn't find anything, but the Merritt Visor gets Edison just barely holds on and lives. Houston caps second and have 3:55 going to third. They are just steamrolling. Hanbin tries to end up leaving with energy. Dante says no. The Ana gets staggered and dies. Dante punches Edison, who visors and dies. Houston just rolls the pillow to victory and easily win that map. Their offense there was hardly any resistance coming from Dallas on that on their defense. And then moving on to the last map of the series, Dorado, which ended up being 2-1 for Houston, which I forgot where. But Fearless comes back in for Hanbin, and Piggy comes in for Dante, so we do not see the Dante tank. So this is actually Piggy, my bad. So Dallas starts on the offense, and they start off with a Widow, Echo, Winston on a Lucio versus Houston's Ashe, Pharah, Diva on a Mercy, which is a very on-scene comp so far. Dallas TP their backline to orange. Sparkle swaps over to Genji. Piggy is staging behind red, and Pelican frags Sparkle. Piggy's holding, and now Piggy's just backing up to the choke. As soon as any pressure is put on him, he just backs up. Pelican gets Sparkle and Edison on his fire pick, and Houston ended up cleaning up. Now there's 2:20 on the clock. So, Edison swaps over to Soldier from, what is it? Widow. And the cart's now back at the choke at the bridge. Nano Barrage Pelican gets Fielder. Nano Fearless is slept. Merit falls to Fearless. Pelican goes down. Last row Valk reses him, but then Pelican immediately does again. Bob does not make it to point and gets slept. Fearless is 20 HP in the backline. Edison Visor gets Merit. Sparkle gets Pharmacy. And Dallas have 318 entering second. Pelican then swaps off of Ash to Soldier 76. Piggy's on the first corner, high ground. Between the both, doing wherever he needs to be at the time. Dallas drops from high ground because they all went around coast, went up to high ground, but they dropped for a Nano Blade, which gets slept and moved back by Iris. Pelican frags Edison early out too, so then both DPS are essentially neutralized, and the cart is stopped over the bridge at 2 minutes left on the clock. Fearless dives Merit, but is slept. Pelican Nano gets Sparkle, and that was 1 minute on the clock. Fearless has forced to use his bubble early. Piggy takes him out, so he's forced to primal, but he gets nanoed, but then he's slept. Pelican gets Edison and Fearless, and the cart is under the bridge with 30 seconds left. Dallas is trying to get to high ground through the coast, but Edison Visor gets Iris. Lastro reses him. Pelican frags out Edison. Merit Bob gets Fearless. Sparkle goes down to Iris, and Houston win as the cart is just under the bridge. Now we have Houston's offense, which is round 2. Maybe I'll stop doing that. The round ones, that doesn't really matter. So we see Dallas trying to defend with the Widow Echo Winston on a Brig versus Houston's Ashe Echo Diva on a Mercy. So we see Divas. I actually believe... I don't know what I believe, never mind. I believe something, but I guess not. Yeah, I was thinking something different, my bad. Anyway, Fearless is on the upper red corner of the contested cart, the first corner. Merit falls back, and Dallas give high ground, and that's 3:15. The cart gets through the choke. Edison is far back and scared of Pelican, who is basically everywhere at once. He was on coast peeking out. He goes back and he's on the tower peeking out. Sparkle goes down to Pelican. Pelican is now going into the Dallas spawn, and Houston clean up Dallas. And then they enter second with 4:32 on the clock. Sparkle Nano does not get Pelican because of Piggy's DM, which is very clutch. The card moves around the corner. Nano Pelican gets slept, but it gets woken up, but it still gets nothing. Lastro Valks, Piggy gets Edison. Iris is anti and goes down to Fearless Primal. Fearless also gets Lastro, and Pelican rally Brig to hold. Pelican copies Rally, and he copies Brig and rallies to hold the space. I guess it doesn't really do a lot. Maybe it was a misclick. And now the cart is at under the bridge at 2:40. Edison is now on Soldier. Sparkle copies Diva. The Diva bump zones them but doesn't get anything. Geo gets caught by Pelican. Pelican gets Sparkle, and Houston win the match 3-0. So overall, this match, Houston looked very dominant the entire time. I suppose on the first map, the very first map, this one specifically, was Dallas's best showing, but Houston just was better as the game goes on. It wasn't even close. The Dante Doom looked good. The Piggy Diva looked good. And they looked like they had a very good idea of what they were doing the entire time. Dallas didn't look bad, but they were always a step behind, and the Zarya picks never truly worked out. They just this match was the fastest match so far this week, so far this season. It's very quick. The tempo that Houston was bringing was very fast, except on their Dorado offense, where they were playing more methodical to looking for picks using the Echo Mercy. But yeah. The tempo Houston brought was very fast. Dallas didn't look bad, but they were always a step behind. And Zarya picks didn't work. Edison looked kind of mid-medicine, and Sparkle looked very good. but didn't get the support in any dives with him or the bubbles that were provided with by Han Benzaria. It's never really worked out. The Tommathan player of the match went to Iris for consistently sleeping all Dallas threats. Anyone on Dallas could have been anyone on Houston, anyone on Houston could have been MVP here, but Iris was flashy and shut down all the momentum that Fuel tried to gain through nano boosts, through blades. Just the sleeps weren't crazy at all times. So definitely still at form from last season. Yeah, anyway, if you enjoyed, thanks, man. Swag.